Hello friends, I'm here to share with you my personal definition of music therapy. I think it's super important that as music therapy students and soon to be music therapy professionals that we have a definition ready to go because as we all know, there are always people wanting to know what music therapy is. And I think it's extra important because I often find it's kind of hard to try to explain, and sometimes I think it's like, it's one of those things where you got to see it to really understand it. But 99% of the time, we don't have that option. So why is it so hard to define? First off, people often have preconceptions about what music therapy is. They hear music therapy, they don't understand, they jump to a conclusion. And how many times have we all heard, "Oh, do you play music for people?" Sometimes, but it's a lot more complicated than that. People often simplify the idea of music therapy. I've also heard, "Oh yeah, music is my therapy." That's great that you use music therapeutically, but that does not mean it's music therapy. And then another thing I often find is people just hear music and nothing after that. And I can't say how many times I've heard people say, "Music therapy, so you're going to be a music teacher?" No, that's not what I'm going to do. So some things to consider when trying to define music therapy is that a memorized definition of music therapy will not work for every situation that you're in. Some things you have to consider are your audience, the situation you're in, and the amount of time you actually have to try to explain to this person or group of people what music therapy is. So, going off of that, this is my personal definition of music therapy. Music therapy is the use of music to help clients achieve non-musical goals. It is not music therapy unless it takes place between a board-certified music therapist and his or her client or clients. The music therapist creates specific music-based objectives which lead to the client or clients reaching a broader non-musical goal. The music itself is not the therapy, but it is the modem through which the therapist is able to connect with the client or clients and the tool that is used to help reach goals. So that's my basic definition. If I only have a few seconds to try to explain to someone what music therapy is, I think it's a pretty cut and dry explanation of what it is. It's not too in-depth, but I think it kind of covers the basis of what we do. We always hope to have more time to explain to people more of what music therapy is. So if I do have more time, I like to kind of give some examples of why music works, why we use music as music therapists. So one of the main reasons, as we all know, is music is non-threatening. It is a fantastic thing to use. Almost everyone likes music, and it's not something that is quite so intimidating for people. It helps build rapport between client and therapist, which is super important. A lot of times I think people are in any sort of therapeutic situation, it can be really intimidating trying to build that relationship with the therapist. And the longer it takes to build that relationship, the longer it's going to take to actually get the results that you're looking for. So music helps quickly build that rapport between the client and therapist, which then leads to being able to achieve the goals you're working towards quicker. And like I said, most people enjoy music in some form or other. Maybe some people enjoy a wider range of music. Some people might have a more narrow genre that they listen to, but it doesn't matter. Everyone likes music for the most part. Another reason it works is that involvement is possible on so many levels. Starting out with the basic, it could just be listening to a piece. You can then move up to actively participating in the music making, whether it be playing along to hand percussion, singing along, or even songwriting. And then you can go even more in depth to, like I just said, songwriting, improvisation, and even song analysis. And then finally, I think there is music that can reflect nearly every situation that a person might be in, which is really, really great. If you're trying to connect with a client and words just don't quite fit, you can find music to help show that you understand what that client is going through by playing that music. And then if I have more time, I think it's really important to be able to give a sample clinical example of what music therapy is, because a definition can only get you so far until you have some concrete samples of what might be an actual music therapy situation. I've found for me that that is most helpful for when I'm trying to understand things, is when I have an actual example of it. So the sample clinical example that I typically use is autism, because that's something that most people have heard about. People are aware of autism, and I think most people are kind of aware of the general things to expect when someone is diagnosed with autism, especially that kind of lack of typical social interaction. So then I would kind of just give some examples of goals and then objectives that we would set as a music therapist. So the first goal might be to increase attention, and then I would give the sample objective of maybe we're going to ask that the client plays along on drums to a song for 10 seconds. And over time, we increase that amount of time that they are consistently playing, and that then builds attention. Second goal would be to increase social interaction. And an objective that I might set and use it as an example would be having the client sing a song that kind of talks about different social cues, and then following those cues. So maybe in the song, some of the lyrics would be, look into your friend's eyes and wave hello. And then the client would then follow those instructions, and through that song would learn some of these social cues that are easier to pick up on for people who aren't autistic. And then if I have more time, and if the person I'm talking to hasn't already clocked out, for some people it's already gone whoosh right over their head. So we hope that they're still interested in what music therapy is. They're interested by this thing they've never heard of, and it just makes sense that you would use music in therapy or as therapy. So then I would also add in some more really interesting things, like music's effect on the brain. I think that is super cool, and I think it's something that would really catch someone's attention, especially when you tell them the statistic that music is one of the few activities, I should say active music making, is one of the few, if not the only activity that lights up the entire brain. And then I'd like to throw in the little tidbit about music being able to bypass damaged areas of the brain, because to me it's like mind-blowing that music can do that, and I think it goes the same for other people, that it's just something they never would have thought of. I also like to throw in different populations we work with, because again, if I give the example of autism, people might think that that's the only population we work with, or I think people often assume that we work with geriatrics, which is true, but that's not all we work with. So I think it's good to give the wide range of populations that we work with, because that just kind of shows even more how much we are able to do. And then finally, I might throw in some information about different facilities we work at, because again, people might assume that there's not a lot of places that we can work, which we all know is not true at all. So, thank you for listening to my definition of music therapy. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned a little bit. Thanks!